Well, I grew up with no money. My dad earned $2,000 a year when I was growing up, and I think I was in public school all the way through about middle of my 14th year. I took the bus downtown. I mean, I know what middle-class background is like because I lived it. So I'm a middle-class kid who happens to have a lot of money right now, and that's the difference. And what I want is every other middle-class kid in America to have the same opportunity I had. And whether you have money or not...
The same opportunity to do what?
To be successful. I earned my first million on my own. I mean, people forget that. I actually made an investment in an investment bank. 3 of us started it, and when I sold my interest, that was my money. And then I invested in my family firm. But the point is this. I want everybody in America to have an opportunity to be whatever they want to be, whether it's a ballerina or whether it's a nurse or a doctor or a commentator or a businessman, anything.
Well, let's hope not too many of them want to be commentators. Let me talk about political views across lifestyle issues. I know that you carry around with you Bill Bennett's book on Book of Virtue, or at least I've read that, and there's much talk about that, and it's been high up on the bestseller list, and we spent an hour with him on this broadcast several weeks ago. What is it? There seems to be this contradiction in, or at least an apparent surprise in your political philosophy. You're a conservative Republican, certainly on fiscal issues. On the other hand, you're in favor of choice, yes? Yes. You're in favor of the Baker gun control bill, yes? You're in favor of gay rights, yes? On the other hand, you feel very strongly about the support of what is called the Christian right in American politics. Any contradictions there for you, and what are you bridging there, either of you?
Well, I believe that we are at a turning point in our culture, and that the discussion of God and our religious beliefs is very legitimate. As Stephen Carter wrote, why is it legitimate to bring up your beliefs
This is
when
the
it
culture
comes,
of belief written by
yes, the
Stephen
culture
Carter,
of
the
disbelief,
Yale professor.
who is a liberal Democrat,
Right.
That's why I bring him up. And as he said very brilliantly in his book, why is it legitimate to bring forward your beliefs in God when you discuss civil rights and when you are fighting segregation? But it's not legitimate when you're in favor of teaching children at high schools about abstinence when it comes to sex education. If anybody mentions that in sex education classes and brings up questions of ethics and spirituality, immediately the cry goes up, separation of church and state. Well, this is for me a very bogus cry, because the separation of church and state was intended to stop the establishment of a church. It was not intended to remove any discussion of God from the public debate. So we have now reduced God to a hobby, to something that happens on a Sunday or on the Sabbath, and we need to bring him back into our everyday lives.
But at the same time, you know, in the political discussion in America, a part of the Christian right in America, part of their political grassroots campaign is because they believe, you know, that gay rights, and they were strongly against gay rights in terms of the military, and have been strongly right to life in their political beliefs. Yet, you know, you on 2 central issues are at odds with them, and they are and have been increasingly important in the politics of the Republican Party.
But I'm an inclusive Republican who is reaching out to the left of the party, to the right of the party, and everyone in between. And I even go beyond that. I'm reaching out to, obviously, the people who are in United We Stand, who support Perot, group. Right, and conservative, moderate Democrats. I'm trying to bring everybody together. And that's one reason my first ad on TV was recommending that people read the Book of Virtues. Virtues are universal, no matter what religion or country you come from. Same thing with Arianna's book, The Fourth Instinct. I think that people are ready for something beyond materialism, and it gets back to something that's a higher denominator, and I call that God.
All right, I want to come to this. We'll talk about the book in a second, but let me take a look at one campaign commercial. This is from your campaign in California for the Senate race against Democrat Dianne Feinstein. Take a look.
November 20th, Dianne Feinstein sponsors the Clinton Health Plan, a government takeover of health care.
The government that gave us the welfare mess now wants to screw up health care. The Clinton plan takes away your right to choose your doctor. It raises taxes and destroys jobs.
The Clinton Health Plan and Feinstein dropped in the polls, so on May 25th, Feinstein flip-flopped and deserted the health plan. It's the only principle of a career politician: save your own skin.
That begs this question: which health care plan are you supporting that is now under discussion in the Senate?
Well, let me first say one thing. Having come out of surgery on July 4th, a weekend, apparently my first words, thank God for private health care.
It's in the recovery room, that's what he said.
If we had had a government-run health care system, government-run, I couldn't have gotten an operation on July 4th.
What would be a government-run health care system?
It's one where everybody reports to the government. All the money that we pay in taxes goes to the government. The government then pays the doctors.
But that's not really what they're talking about.
Oh,
I mean,
yes,
that's not,
they are.
Well, but let me suggest to you that the bill that because I just had a conversation yesterday with Senator Moynihan and Senator Dole, neither of them are suggesting that either the Dole bill or B, the bill that came out of the Senate Finance Committee, which was supported by a coalition of Republicans like Senator Chafee and John Breaux, says what you're just suggesting, that this is run by that was a bill reported out of the Senate Finance Committee.
But
which is
we have Hillary and Bill Clinton who are going on a week-long bus trip to promote their plan. They still want their plan, which is run by the government. And all I'm saying is, here's an example, by the way, of Feinstein, who was for that plan, knowing that it had government mandates for businesses, which would cost jobs. She only dropped out because she was dropping in the polls and because the Clinton health care plan was also dropping in the polls.
Speaking of that, what's the impact of the president in this race?
In our race?
Yes.
Well, he's raised a couple of $1 million for Mrs. Feinstein. Now, this is a little bit outrageous.
We've already determined that money's not going to be our problem.
No, but she doesn't need that money. She could spend her own. And she's raising money from special interest, which is a problem. But Clinton, California is very important to him, obviously.
Yeah, he is. He spends a lot of time out there. It's almost like it's second state for him.
Well, that's correct, more so than in Arkansas. In fact, it's his first state. But I will say this, if we're so lucky, and I think we will be victorious on November 8th, it will send shockwaves around this country because we not only have Feinstein, who was, quote-unquote, the most popular politician in California, being defeated, but we also have the president, who obviously has spent at least, I think, 8 to 12 trips out to California.
But are you running in part against him? I mean, is he going to become an issue that you're running against the Clinton administration because you want to go to Washington and change the way the Clintons are doing business?
No, it's the Clinton-Feinstein administration.
Yeah, so you are making the president an issue in the campaign?
Mostly her votes, but certainly he will be involved.
Okay. And speaking of California, how do you size up the race now between the governor and the treasurer?
Tough race. I mean,
pretty even, you think?
I'd say even, just like ours.
Yeah. And your race, the polls show you pretty even. So
all our polls show us even with Feinstein, which is 30-point gain since I guess it was January.
Yeah. Did you promise in your congressional campaign that you would be there for 3 terms?
No.
You never made any promise like that?
My promise was that I would serve for no more than 8 years, and then if our term limit initiative passed, I would serve for no more than 6. I never said I'd serve for the full 6.
Does that mean you're in favor of term limits?
Oh, I'm adamantly in favor of term limits. In fact, I was one of the largest financial supporters of the term limit initiative in California.
I want to get into this book. This is the 4th instinct, the call of the soul. Here's what's interesting. The 3 instincts are power, survival, and sex. Yes?
Survival first.
Survival first. And that's food and shelter and whatever.
Except in New York.
And how do we know what these instincts are? I mean, is this something you learned in Greece or growing up in Greece?
This is pretty universally accepted. Different biologists or psychologists give them different names, but they all agree.
It's the most powerful instincts and the most powerful urges are for survival first,
then
power,
you know, the territorial instinct to make a place for ourselves in the world, and then sex, which Freud tried to make us believe is everything.
Right.
And the theme of...
And so did Picasso, to read your book.
Picasso, power and sex together.
Yes, right. And so, and so then...
So the 4th instinct is the neglected instinct in our culture. It's the instinct to reconnect with God, the spiritual instinct, yes. Yeah. And the theme of the book is that until we recognize that instinct, until we recognize that we all have it, even people who claim they're atheists or agnostics, we all have it. And when we recognize it and accept it and live it and follow it, then even the first 3 instincts become better. So I'm not denying the first 3 instincts. All I'm saying is that even if all we're interested in is our job and our relationship and having a good life, we can't achieve that without bringing God and our spiritual side into our lives. And we see that all around us. We see plenty of successful people, rich and famous, who cannot get through a day without some form of chemical crutch, whether it's alcohol or Prozac or Valium. Many of them, if they're lucky, end up drying out at the Betty Ford Clinic. So this is a turning point because we've seen what's happened to people who've tried to find happiness exclusively through the first 3 instincts, and they have failed.
Yes. Well, clearly, when you look at the success of some of the books that are on the bestseller list, that it is resonating. These ideas are resonating, if books are any indication. Thank you for joining us. We'll be watching the race closely.
We're both delighted to be here.
Thank you very much.
Very excited about it.
Thank you.